For over a decade, a bizarre and unsettling mystery has haunted the shores of British Columbia, Canada. Severed human feet, still encased in running shoes, have been washing ashore with eerie regularity. Since 2007, a total of 16 feet have been discovered, most of which remain unidentified. Curiously, only 2 of these feet were left feet, both eventually matched to their right counterparts. The rest? All from different individuals. This macabre phenomenon has sparked countless questions. Where are these feet coming from? Why did they start appearing only after 2007? And why have no other body parts surfaced alongside them? Speculation has run wild over the years. Some have pointed to natural disasters, like the 2004 tsunami, as a possible explanation. Others have floated darker theories involving drug dealers, serial killers, or human traffickers. There were even whispers that local medical students might be playing a twisted prank with cadaver parts, or that the feet could belong to passengers from a plane crash at sea. Adding to the mystery is the fact that a human foot can float astonishing distances, up to 1,000 miles, making it a nightmare for investigators to trace their origins. One local who discovered the 5th foot shared his chilling theory: there's someone doing this, all right. Think about it. If they tied a chain around someone's ankle and threw them overboard, the foot would just pop off. That could explain it. Maybe they've got a lot of bodies stored up in a container, and they got washed out. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff that goes on over here. But the truth, while still tragic, is far less sinister. Forensic investigators believe most of the feet likely belong to individuals who took their own lives by jumping off the Patullo Bridge in New Westminster, plunging into the dark, murky waters below. Others may have drowned accidentally. The ocean, teeming with scavengers, can quickly reduce a human body to almost nothing, except for the parts it can't easily reach. Submersion and decay take care of the rest. However, when these individuals died, they were wearing running shoes and socks, creating a protective shell around their feet. Once the ankles disintegrated, the buoyant shoes floated to the surface, carried by ocean currents to the shore. This also explains why no feet in sandals or stilettos have been found. Running shoes, with their lightweight and air-filled soles, are uniquely suited to float. Of the feet recovered so far, many have been linked to individuals with mental illnesses, while 3 appear to have belonged to people who died of natural causes. Experts emphasize that there's no evidence of foul play in any of these cases, though they haven't entirely ruled it out either. So why did these feet only start appearing after 2007? The answer is simple: they didn't. That's just when the phenomenon began receiving widespread media attention, prompting locals to be more vigilant about spotting and reporting washed-up body parts. Before then, similar discoveries might have gone unnoticed or unreported. In the end, the explanation for this eerie mystery is far more mundane than the sensational theories that continue to circulate. While it's possible that not all the feet belong to suicide victims or accidental drownings, after all, thousands of people die at sea every year under various circumstances, there's no concrete evidence to suggest anything more sinister. For now, all locals can do is wait and see if more feet wash ashore. And given the patterns of the past, it seems almost inevitable that they will. In 1931, Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos was a 21-year-old Cuban-American woman living in Florida, renowned in the Key West area for her striking beauty and exotic charm. Her family, though blessed with good looks, was tragically cursed when it came to health. Tuberculosis, a deadly and incurable disease at the time, ravaged her family, claiming nearly all of her immediate relatives. Elena, too, fell victim to the illness and was rushed to the local hospital for treatment. There, she came under the care of Dr. Karl Tanzler, a German-born physician with a brilliant medical mind but an eccentric personality. Tanzler was immediately captivated by Elena's beauty and became deeply infatuated with her. During her treatment, he showered her with gifts, jewelry, clothing, and even declarations of love. Whether Elena reciprocated his feelings remains unclear, but Tanzler's obsession with her only grew stronger. Despite his tireless efforts, Tanzler could not save Elena. On October 25, 1931, she succumbed to tuberculosis. Heartbroken, Tanzler took it upon himself to ensure she had a grand farewell. He paid for her entire funeral and commissioned an elaborate above-ground mausoleum, sparing no expense. Elena's family, grateful for his generosity, saw it as a touching gesture from a man who had grown close to their beloved relative during her final days. But their gratitude turned to horror when, years later, they visited Elena's grave and found it empty. Her body had been stolen. The mystery of who had taken her and why baffled investigators for years. Little did anyone suspect that the culprit was none other than Dr. Tanzler himself. From the moment Tanzler first laid eyes on Elena, he believed she was the woman destined to be his bride. As a child, he claimed to have had visions of his ancestor, Countess Anna Constantia von Kosel, who revealed the face of his one true love. When Tanzler met Elena, he was convinced she was the woman from his visions. Her death did nothing to diminish his obsession. If anything, it only deepened it. For 2 years after her death, Tanzler visited Elena's mausoleum nightly, spending hours with her remains. But mere visits were not enough. He wanted more, a physical connection. One night in April, under the cover of darkness, Tanzler broke into the mausoleum, removed Elena's body, and wheeled it back to his home in a toy wagon. By then, Elena's body had been decaying for 2 years. But to Tanzler, she was still beautiful. Determined to preserve her, he embarked on a grotesque project to restore her. He replaced her decomposed eyes with glass ones, used wire and coat hangers to reinforce her skeletal structure, and encased her decaying skin in wax and plaster. As her scalp rotted away, he fashioned a wig from her fallen hair. Over time, he filled her hollowed chest and abdomen with rags to maintain her shape. Tanzler dressed Elena in fine clothes and jewelry, dousing her in perfumes and preservatives to mask the stench of decay. He transformed her into a macabre doll, a synthetic replica of the woman he loved. For 7 years, he kept her body in his bed, sleeping beside her every night. When authorities finally discovered Tanzler's secret, they were horrified. He was arrested and charged, but the case against him eventually fell apart. The statute of limitations had expired, and Tanzler was set free. Surprisingly, public opinion was mixed. Some saw him as a deranged man, while others viewed him as a tragic romantic, driven by an unshakable love. Even after the scandal, Tanzler's obsession persisted. Some accounts suggest he created a life-sized effigy of Elena using a death mask, while others speculate he may have secretly replaced her body with another and continued to keep her close. Whatever the truth, Tanzler spent the rest of his life devoted to his doll bride. He died at the age of 75, with some claiming he passed away in the arms of the lifeless Elena replica. The story of Dr. Karl Tanzler and his eternal bride remains one of the most bizarre and chilling tales of obsession, love, and the lengths to which one man would go to defy death itself. In 1981, Minneapolis was gripped by fear as a mysterious and deeply disturbed killer terrorized the city. Dubbed the weeper-voiced killer for his tearful, trembling phone calls to police, this man's crimes were as shocking as his demeanor. His reign of terror began with a chilling 911 call. The man on the line was breathing heavily, his voice choked with sobs as he confessed, "Please find me, I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody." The police soon discovered the body of 18-year-old Kimberly Compton, a student who had been brutally stabbed 61 times with an ice pick. This was the first of 3 murders committed by the weeper-voiced killer, a man who seemed tormented by his own actions yet unable to stop. Over the next 2 years, he would attack and kill women, then call the police to confess, sometimes apologizing, sometimes boasting, but always leaving a trail of horror in his wake. 2 days after Compton's murder, the killer called again, this time to express remorse.
"Don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry what I did to Compton. I couldn't help it. Don't know why I had to stab her. I am so upset about it. I keep getting drunk every day and I can't believe I think it's a big dream. I can't think of being locked up. If I get locked up, I'll kill myself. I'd rather kill myself than get locked up. I'll try not to kill anybody else."
But his remorse was short-lived. The very next day, he called again, this time to correct inaccuracies in the newspaper reports about Compton's murder.
"Please don't talk, just listen. I'm sorry I killed that girl. I stabbed her 40 times. Kimberly Compton was the first one. Oh, my face. I don't know what's the matter with me. I'm gonna kill myself, I think.
Where are you?
I'm just gonna... There's somebody dying
It became clear that the killer was not only consumed by guilt but also reveling in the attention his crimes were garnering. Detectives feared it was only a matter of time before he struck again. Their fears were justified. The weeper-voiced killer's next victim was 33-year-old Kathleen Diane Greening, whom he drowned in her bathtub. His third victim, 40-year-old Barbara Simons, was stabbed over 100 times in a frenzied attack. The sheer brutality of Simon's murder suggested a deep-seated rage or an uncontrollable compulsion to kill. The killer's calls to the police grew increasingly erratic, blending remorse with a disturbing sense of pride in his crimes.
Oh, you find me? I just stabbed somebody with an ice pick. I can't stop myself. I keep killing somebody.
The weeper-voiced killer's reign of terror might have continued indefinitely if not for the quick thinking of a 21-year-old prostitute named Denise Williams. The killer had targeted Denise as his fourth victim, luring her to his apartment under the guise of a typical encounter. Afterward, he offered to drive her home, but Denise soon realized something was wrong. Instead of taking her back to her usual spot, he drove her to a dark, deserted suburban area and pulled into a dead-end road. Sensing danger, Denise grabbed an empty bottle from the car floor, preparing to defend herself. When the man pulled out a screwdriver and stabbed her multiple times in the stomach, she smashed the bottle over his head, causing him to bleed profusely. Seizing the opportunity, Denise fled the car and escaped, saving not only her own life but potentially countless others. Shortly after the attack, a familiar voice called 911. It was the weeper-voiced killer, but this time, he wasn't calling to confess. He was calling for an ambulance. Denise's blow had left him severely injured, and he needed medical attention.
Yes, please, this is an emergency. Please send a squad to Pierce Butler Road, Molenberg Manufacturing Company, machine shop. Please, there's an ambulance too. There's a girl hurt there.
Can you tell me what happened to her?
Just hurry, she's laying on the ground in the back by the railroad tracks, by the edge here. Hurry.
What's the address?
I don't know.
Who are you?
Police were notified, and within minutes, they had their man, Paul Michael Stephanie, a 40-year-old janitor with a history of mental illness. Stephanie's arrest brought an end to his killing spree. He was convicted of murder and attempted murder and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence, Stephanie refused to confess to the murders for nearly 2 decades. He died in prison in 1998 from skin cancer, taking the full extent of his motives and madness to the grave. In 1991, Charles Donovan made a frantic call to the police, pleading for an officer to be sent to his home immediately. He claimed he had just picked up a hitchhiker who had attacked him with a screwdriver, demanding money. According to Charles, he managed to escape, fleeing to a nearby store for help. The hitchhiker chased him but eventually gave up, allowing Charles to return to his truck. Shaken, he drove around to clear his head before heading back to the house he shared with his mother, Dorothy Donovan. But when Charles arrived home, he was met with a chilling sight. The same hitchhiker who had just attacked him was lurking outside his property. Panicked, Charles called the police again. By the time an officer arrived, the hitchhiker had vanished. To ensure Charles' safety, the officer escorted him inside, only to discover a broken back door window. Rushing upstairs, they found Dorothy's lifeless body in her bedroom. She had been brutally stabbed to death. Nothing had been stolen, and a bloody handprint on the banister suggested the killer had left in a hurry. Charles quickly became the prime suspect. His story seemed far-fetched. What were the odds that the same hitchhiker who had tried to rob him would randomly show up at his house, break in, and murder his mother without taking anything? It sounded like a desperate alibi concocted on the spot. But as the investigation unfolded, the case took a shocking turn. DNA extracted from the bloody handprint proved Charles was innocent. Even more astonishing, 4 eyewitnesses came forward to confirm that the hitchhiker did, in fact, exist. Charles' unbelievable story was true. The case gained national attention when it was featured on the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries in 1995. 4 years, the identity of the hitchhiker remained a mystery, until 2006, 15 years after the murder. Gilbert E. Cannon, a man with a criminal history, was finally identified as the killer. His DNA matched the sample from the crime scene, and he confessed to Dorothy's murder. Gilbert admitted he had been high on drugs at the time and was looking for a place to stay for the night. By sheer chance, he stumbled upon Charles and Dorothy's home, the first house he found with no lights on. In a drug-fueled haze, he broke in and stabbed Dorothy to death with his screwdriver. Gilbert was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On August 28, 2003, at 2:28 p.m., Brian Wells, a 46-year-old pizza delivery driver from Pennsylvania, walked into a bank clutching a walking cane. He approached the teller and handed over a note with a chilling demand: gather all employees with access to the vault and fill a bag with $250,000. He gave them 15 minutes to comply. But this was no ordinary bank robbery. Brian wasn't armed with a gun or backed by a team. Instead, he had something far more sinister strapped around his neck, a device concealed beneath his shirt. When he lowered his collar, he revealed a bulky, box-like contraption, a bomb. The bank employees, terrified, didn't dare argue. With no access to the vault at that hour, the teller managed to scrape together only $9,000. Brian took the money, grabbed a lollipop from the counter, and fled in his car. Minutes later, state troopers cornered him in a McDonald's parking lot. As they cuffed him, Brian frantically explained his side of the story. He claimed he had been delivering pizzas to a remote address when a group of men ambushed him. They held him at gunpoint, locked the explosive device around his neck, and forced him to rob the bank. The police were skeptical but couldn't take any chances. The bomb squad was called, and officers kept their weapons trained on Brian as they waited for the experts to arrive. Time was ticking, and the tension was palpable. Brian begged for help, screaming, "Why isn't anybody trying to get this thing off me?" At 3:18 p.m., the device began beeping. The sound grew faster and more frantic. Brian tried to shuffle away, as if putting distance between himself and the bomb could save him. Then, bang! The bomb exploded, tearing a fist-sized hole in Brian's neck. Surrounded by news cameras, he took his last gasps of air. Exactly 50 minutes after entering the bank, Brian Wells was dead. 3 minutes later, the bomb squad arrived. The investigation that followed revealed a bizarre and intricate plot. The bomb was no amateur device, it was a marvel of DIY engineering. Designed like a giant tank, it contained 4 small pipe bombs and was rigged with decoy wires and fake warning stickers to confuse anyone attempting to disarm it. The cane Brian carried wasn't just a walking stick, it was a homemade shotgun. Inside his car, detectives found a series of notes addressed to the bomb hostage. The instructions were meticulous. Brian was to rob the bank, retrieve $250,000, and then follow a scavenger hunt across town to find 4 keys and a code to unlock the bomb. The notes ended with a chilling warning: act now, think later, or you will die. The police followed the notes' directions, hoping to uncover the masterminds behind the heist. But the trail led to a jar in the woods, which was supposed to contain the next set of instructions, except the note had been removed. The criminals, dubbed the collar bombers by the media, had been watching the police from the start. For 7 years, the FBI was stumped. Who would devise such a convoluted plan, one that seemed destined to fail? The answer, it turned out, was a mix of madness and manipulation. Brian Wells wasn't the innocent victim he appeared to be. Deep in debt to a group of crack dealers, he had been desperate for a way out. He had started a relationship with a prostitute who was addicted to crack, and her dealers were now after him. Enter Kenneth Barnes, Bill Rothstein, and Marjorie Deal Armstrong, the trio behind the plot. They recruited Brian, promising him a cut of the loot in exchange for wearing a fake bomb and carrying out the heist. If caught, the notes in his car would prove he was coerced. To Brian, it seemed like the perfect plan. But his accomplices double-crossed him. Just before the heist, they pinned him down and locked a real bomb around his neck. Brian went from playing the part of a hostage to becoming one. The collar was designed to detonate if tampered with, ensuring Brian's fate was sealed from the start. The money wasn't even the ultimate goal for Bill Rothstein, the alleged mastermind. A handyman with a knack for engineering, Rothstein had built both the bomb and the cane gun. He wasn't after wealth, he wanted fame. He wanted to create a crime so bizarre and captivating that it would make headlines and baffle investigators. Rothstein manipulated his co-conspirators with ease. Brian was desperate, Kenneth was a drug addict, and Marjorie, though intelligent, was unstable. Rothstein died in 2004, taking many secrets to his grave. Kenneth and Marjorie were left to face the consequences. Marjorie died in prison in April 2017, just days before the anniversary of the crime. The case of the collar bomb heist remains one of the most bizarre and tragic crimes in modern history. It's a story of desperation, betrayal, and the lengths people will go to when backed into a corner. Brian Wells may not have been innocent, but he was undoubtedly a victim, a pawn in a deadly game orchestrated by a man who wanted to leave his mark on the world, no matter the cost.